Black Hollow Manor stood on a lonely hill, casting a dark shadow over the small, forgotten town below. The mansion was enormous, its tall windows, sharp-pointed roofs visible from miles away. Even after standing empty for more than a century, it held an eerie power over the town. Nobody who had grown up there would dare step foot inside, but there were always rumors, flashes of lights in the attic at midnight, whispers carried by the wind, and a woman's sorrowful face in the upstairs window. The manor once belonged to Alaric Blackwood, a wealthy but mysterious man who had come to the town years ago with his wife Elara. Alaric kept to himself, rarely seen in the town, but he adored Elara. The townsfolk noticed how he would gaze out in the window with longing, as if searching for something beyond the mansion's walls. Some whispered that Alaric was too possessive, that he kept her hidden away, and then, one night, she vanished. Alaric was beside himself, tearing through the house and shouting her name. He told the servants she had been taken by a dark force, and that he would find her, whatever it took. After days of searching, Alaric too disappeared, and the mansion felt silent. The servants left, never returning, and the doors of Black Hollow Manor were locked, frozen in time. Stories grew about the house, tales of a man who had bargained with something dark and paid a terrible price. Children dared each other to go near the house, but all of them, even the bravest, ran back only after a few minutes. Generations later, Sarah and Ethan, two ghost hunters, decided to investigate. They'd heard the rumors and know this would be their biggest adventure yet. They loaded up their gear, flashlights, cameras, voice recorders, and drove to Black Hollow Manor on a chilly October evening. As they approached, the wind howled through the empty windows, and the house seemed to lean toward them, as if it were waiting. Stepping inside, they were hit by a wall of cold air, heavy with the smell of dust and mold. The grand entry hall was still and silent, but they could feel the weight of 100 years pressing down on them. As they took out their equipment, Ethan suggested, "We'll cover more ground if we split up." Sarah hesitated, but she nodded. She could already feel a strange tension, like someone was watching them. Ethan climbed the staircase to the second floor, and Sarah turned down the hallway that led deeper into the house. She passed through room after room, each one filled with the furniture and decorations left behind, as though the house had simply waited for someone to return. Portraits of the Blackwood family hung on the walls, their eyes following her as she walked. She found herself in a bedroom, where a small photograph on the dresser caught her attention. It was Elara, her face soft and beautiful, but her eyes were distant, almost sad. Just as Sarah looked up, she heard faint footsteps in the hall behind her. "Ethan?" she called out, but only silence replied. She felt a chill run down her spine. Meanwhile, Ethan wandered through the upstairs hallway, drawn to a faint light coming from a room at the end. He entered what seemed to be a study, its walls lined with ancient leather-bound books. On the desk lay an open journal. Intrigued, he began to read. The entries started off normal, describing daily life, but as the pages went on, they grew more frantic. Alaric wrote about feeling trapped, hearing whispers, seeing shadows follow him wherever he went. He described dreams of dark figures and strange symbols, and his growing terror that they wanted to take Elara. As Ethan flipped to the last page, he felt a cold hand on his shoulder. He jumped, turning quickly, but the room was empty. His heart raced, and he backed out of the study, looking down the hallway. The house felt different. The doors had shifted. Now each one seemed to lead somewhere he didn't recognize. Frustrated, he tried door after door, but every one opened to the same study, trapping him in an endless loop. Downstairs, Sarah was drawn by a soft whisper calling her name. The voice was faint but unmistakable, pleading and sorrowful. She followed it down to a narrow staircase she hadn't noticed before, leading her to a dark, damp cellar. Chains hung from the walls, coated in thick layers of dust, and dark stains covered the floor. The air was cold and thick, filled with a heavy metallic smell. In the shadows, she saw a figure, a woman, with her head hanging low and her wrists bound. It was Elara. Her eyes were wide, with fear as she looked up at Sarah. "Please, help me," Elara whispered. "He won't let me go. He never lets anybody go." Before Sarah could respond, she heard footsteps behind her. Turning, she found herself face to face with a shadowy figure, Alaric. His face was pale and twisted, his eyes empty and dark. "You shouldn't have come," he said, his voice soft but chilling. "Now you'll stay with us, just like her." She tried to back away, but she felt herself rooted to the spot, as if invisible chains were holding her there. Alara's eyes filled with tears as she whispered, "I'm sorry." Upstairs, Ethan was trying to find his way out, his panic growing with every failed attempt. He called out for Sarah, but his voice was swallowed by the thick silence of the house. The hallways seemed to twist and close in on him, leading him back to the study again and again. The cold grip on his shoulder grew stronger, pulling him back towards the journal on the desk. He felt as though he was losing himself, like something was forcing him to stay. Days passed before the townspeople found their abandoned equipment outside of the manor. There was no trace of Sarah or Ethan, and the townspeople began to whisper that the spirits of Black Hollow Manor had claimed 2 more victims. But some say that if you venture near the manor at night, you might hear them, 2 new voices joining the old ones, a man calling out in desperation, and a woman's quiet, fearful sobs. And every now and then, the voices call to those passing by, using their names as if inviting them into the shadows. For those who dare to enter, Black Hollow Manor waits, and it doesn't let anyone leave.